Welcome to Mindful School Marketing, your go-to podcast for personal and professional growth.
We're school marketers, business owners, and moms passionate about connecting other school professionals with tools and strategies for success.
We love solving problems, exploring new ideas, and thinking outside the box. Let's transform your school and life starting right now.
This episode is brought to you by Enquiry Tracker. Easily manage all your inquiries, tours, open houses, and applications with a system designed by K-12 education, marketing, and admissions professionals. Welcome to Mindful School Marketing. I'm Tara Clays.
And I'm Aubrey Bursch. Today, we're joined by Christopher Pryor. Chris is the founder and principal of Lead Team Partners. After a 20-plus year career in independent schools, Chris now leverages his experience and extended network to help school leaders navigate school partner searches. Doing so allows school leaders to prioritize day-to-day operations while delegating the search to a trusted advisor. Welcome, Chris. We're so happy you're here.
Thanks so much, Aubrey and Tara. Glad to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Introduce yourself to our audience for those who don't know you.
Sure. I'm an independent school graduate and then immediately jumped into the admission world following college graduation and worked my way up to a director of admission at a couple different schools. And then I had a wonderful mentor that encouraged me to consider moving into the development space. And so I joined a infant through eighth grade school as the director of development and really enjoyed that work, culminated as an assistant head for advancement. And then I spent a year at a large consulting firm running their business development, which kind of helped me envision the idea for Lead Team Partners. So a long history in schools and both boarding and independent day schools. So I think it's the exact recipe for kind of what I'm doing today.
And speaking of what you're doing today, you recently launched Lead Team Partners. Can you tell us a little bit more about this new and exciting venture and what exactly is a school partner search? I'm sure many schools haven't yet heard of that service before, and they'll want to know more about it.
Yeah, thanks. So schools use search firms for a lot of different things, primarily around talent, head school search, administrator, teacher. And what I found was when I was an administrator is that we always had a strategic need, and that would require often a consultant to come in. And so how do you find that right consultant? How do you vet them? It's a time-intensive process. You don't always know who's out there, so you call a friend down the street. And so I thought this would be a really interesting and helpful service to really busy school administrators. And so when I think of school partner, I think of consultant, I think of a facilitator or a speaker or some type of outside vendor that's going to come in and make your job a little bit easier. And so we do searches primarily in the advancement space, development, enrollment, marketing, communications, as well as strategic planning. But I see the potential to grow across a lot of different areas within schools.
It's a great idea. I think you know so many people in the space, and I think you're a great connector. So it's a great idea, and I hope that I look forward to seeing it grow. And I know you have worked with a lot of schools already and have a lot of experience in the area of advancement and fundraising and development. So let's start by talking a little bit about trends that you're seeing in that area of development and fundraising in general.
Sure. Capital campaigns are definitely back. Every school that I talk to is either in the middle of one or planning for one. And I think, post-COVID, it's people kind of hit a pause, and now they're ready to kind of resume engagement with their community in a big way. And so I see lots of schools engaging in capital campaign efforts. I think there's definitely a focus on leadership and major giving. I see kind of the pretty ubiquitous use of giving days to help with giving participation. No longer are schools kind of leveraging the phone-a-thon I think they're using technology in these giving days to help drive participation, especially in the springtime. I think development offices are overwhelmed with the number of events. And so they're trying to figure out what events to prioritize, which ones really move the needle in terms of their fundraising goals, and which events are there for kind of community building. Certainly galas have been a hot topic among some schools. Do we have them? Are they inclusive? How can we make them more inclusive? Should we have them at all? So I think that's, I see schools kind of making tweaks to their gala strategy. And I think, schools are trying to kind of reinvent how they engage with their alumni. Alumni don't necessarily just want to show up in an urban setting and mingle with people that they don't know that graduated from the institution years ago. So I think they're starting to be more creative in how they gather and engage with their alumni. And finally, because the work is hard, I think you're seeing some openings, and particularly in the data services, advancement services space. I've been hearing a lot about, obviously, the important role of data in developing a strong fundraising program, and so those individuals that kind of live and breathe in the data are gold for your office, and yet they're sometimes hard to keep. I've been seeing some openings in that area. So those are a couple of things that I've been hearing and seeing in my work with development shops around the country.
That's great. I'm so glad you touched on all those things, because it's what we've been seeing as well. And it's so good that you wrapped it all in one, because I don't think schools realize some of those trends that are happening. They might notice them now, as you said, them in their own schools. So thank you for bringing light to some of those trends. Now, one thing you did mention was kind of galas auctions. So it is a hot topic. We've seen many schools struggle, overall with this fundraising format. Often they're begging people to attend, yet only the same people attend. There's also that matter, which you mentioned, of inclusivity, and also limited donations to be had. Yet also auctions continue to be very popular with schools and sometimes are beloved by many in the community. Can you really shed some light on some of the pros and cons of galas and what schools may want to consider when deciding to keep or discontinue these events?
Ooh, sure. I actually just ran a gala for a small independent school in Northern Virginia. It was their first ever event. It was a clean slate. It was a lot of fun. And we were successful. We kind of raised more than they had initially planned, which is great. But generally speaking, I see schools trying to sunset them in some cases and lean into annual fund and major giving, because the lift to put on a gala is a lot, not only in terms of staff time, but also in terms of volunteer time. So some pros, I would say, they're fun. They serve as a community builder, especially after COVID. People wanted to get back into the school. They wanted to rub elbows with teachers. They wanted to see their friends, and in some cases get dressed up. Although I'm seeing a lot of galas are going a little bit more casual this round. I think galas oftentimes raise money for a specific effort. Some of the schools in the DC market do a great job around need-based financial aid, but some families and some communities, that's not a driver for them, and so it's a specific tangible project. I was talking to a school the other day, and they're going to raise money for a new playground. And so they're going to have their cocktail hour on the current playground so that they can remember kind of why they're all there tonight and what can be done with their philanthropy. I also think, it's a great opportunity to bring in sponsors and build excitement around your community and remind them what's so wonderful about your school and your mission and the faculty and staff. So those are all the great reasons to get together and have a gala. The cons, I mentioned, it's a huge lift. The event that I worked on, it took months and dedicated hours, where that's the only thing you're working on, really. They're expensive too. Whether you're renting a space or you're executing it in your own gym or on your campus. I mean, the auctioneer, the drapes, the sound, you name it, they're pretty expensive. And so what's the return on investment? I think galas can breed a sense of a give and get mentality. I know at one school that I worked at, they were definitely gala driven in their philanthropy, and it took a couple of years to move away from this give get mentality and really speak to the fact that their philanthropy was supporting the mission of the school, and they didn't need the trip to Mexico or the tickets to Hamilton to support the institution. And again, we talked about inclusivity. I saw one school in Boston had ticket prices where they were at 3 different levels. There was a standard ticket price. There was a ticket price if you could do a little bit more, and there was a ticket price if you needed to do a little bit less. I thought that was an interesting strategy. A school in Pennsylvania that I recently spoke to dropped their prices down to $50 to come. In the event that we did, it was $100, and yet there were still questions about would we get families to attend, and so by having it be kind of a lower price point, hopefully more families will come. Having it be a little bit more casual and not the black tie event makes it more accessible. But frankly, some people just don't want to get into a big room with a bunch of people from their community, so they're just not, they're not going to go. But the schools that I have seen that have sunset them and leaned into their advancement programming around annual fund and major gifts have really not lost ground. They've gained ground. But again, each community is different. I talked to a school in Michigan, and they're like, I would love, the director of development said, I would love to sunset this, but it's just not going to happen on my watch. So if you're going to have one, I think there are ways to do them pretty well. I think focusing on time with teachers is a great strategy. Certainly kind of setting the deck with the raise the paddle before you get in the room is a smart strategy. I think sponsors is low hanging fruit, and that's where you should focus. And then make sure that people have a great time, so they remember the event and they want to come back in future years and hopefully bring a friend or two. But they are time consuming, and they're you have to think about your community, your overall goals, and whether hosting a gala fits that strategy.
Yeah, those are all great tips and great ideas. I mean, think about where schools have been with COVID and how happy people are to be back in person and not be doing the online trivia as all those types of things, which were really hard to generate enthusiasm for, although I think some people did it with some success. Those are a lot of great tips. Just lost my headphone. So I want to ask you now about millennials and changing parent communities. How do you think that millennials and external events are impacting these fundraising events in schools?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Schools are really trying hard to re-engage families post-COVID. I think in talking to some of the consultants that I speak with, they're being engaged to come in and work with the parent association and define what that organization's role is, what their mission is. I found in my time in schools that parents are busy. Our schools are expensive, and so more and more families have 2 adults working outside the home to earn the money to afford our schools, and so time is short. I found that many parents want to do specific engagements that pertain to their own child or their child's grade and not necessarily the school writ large. I've seen, parents that are very specific about the skill that they have and how they can use it to help your institution, but they're not into just long-term meetings and events. So I think you need to be very strategic about who you ask, how you ask, and have these kind of micro type volunteer opportunities that aren't necessarily year long. Of course, you need those year long things for board members and committee members and other kind of larger term initiatives. But for the most part, parents are focused on their own kids. They're focused on their work, and they want to be home. And so, and with the fact that our tuitions are pretty high, there's this kind of mentality in some places that we pay tuition. We expect that some of this is just going to be done for us, and we can just arrive. So I think the personal ask, just like you do in asking for a gift, is key. Trying to get to know the families, understand where their interests are, and then kind of match them with the appropriate volunteer opportunity. I think also just awareness of that there are a number of ways to get involved. Lots of schools have giving and getting involved pamphlets or brochures to help new families understand the ways in which they can get involved. Because our schools are communities, and that's one of the major value adds, is that you feel part of a community, even though they're not your neighbor around the corner. They might be 30 minutes down the road. My daughter currently attends a school in another state, and it's hard to be involved in that community on a day-to-day. So I do try and look for small opportunities where I can get involved. So I think it's a question of looking again at your strategy, trying to meet parents where they are with their time, and not feeling like you have to do as many events. I think there's definitely burnout on that front. But if they're events that are connected with your child and their experience, I think you're going to have a better return on investment.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode on parent volunteering. And difference, I mean, having worked in the independent school space for almost 20 years, watching that transformation has been very intriguing. And it's interesting how it's impacted development offices. Like there used to be like, oh, the parent volunteers are going to chair these committees and they're going to do these things. I mean, having worked with so many schools who are like, yeah, we can't find a chair for any of this. I'm like, yes.
Right.
No one wants to sign up for it because their priorities have shifted, right? And I think what you mentioned is so important, because it means we need to constantly ask ourselves, like, what's our community up to? Like, they're constantly changing. These millennials, just our parent communities in general have changed, and keeping up to, like you said, like getting to know your families and understand really how they want to volunteer and get involved with your development office is really important. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. Now, in terms of
Aubrey, I would jump in and just say, you need to survey, right?
Yes.
Like ask them if you don't survey, you don't know. And it doesn't have to be a super lengthy survey, but if you just get their feedback, then you can redirect your efforts appropriately. So.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. In fact, it's one of the things we do a lot, because we can sit in our offices and guess or talk to a couple of families, but we need a broader idea of what parents are interested in and why, and then being able to plan around that. So thank you for bringing up the surveys. Very important. Now, we kind of touched on, development teams. And I'm curious, especially like development teams, especially for those small schools. There seems to be this increasing pressure for schools to raise money, right? Yet many schools are operating with limited staffing and resources. In addition, there seems to be a shortage of development professionals in the school space. So what recommendations do you have for small school development teams, or just small teams in general, to be able to meet their goals without burning out?
Yeah, so I was looking online at the NAS job board to see how many development positions were open before our talk today, and there are nearly 200. Many of them are directors of development, directors of advancement. Big schools, small schools, there are definitely jobs to be had. I know of quite a few openings in the DC market. For small schools, development directors have to wear so many different hats. Admission directors, all leadership team members. I think, the key to be successful is to build a strong, trusting relationship with your head of school. I think that that's the most important thing you can do, and be very clear around your goals and your priorities for the year, and kind of have the ability to say, I don't have I don't have time. This doesn't move the needle. This is not going to be a priority this year. I think you need to work very closely with your communications and marketing person. I mean, they're your right hand person in terms of connecting with your constituents and raising the money, since so much of it is now kind of done online through video, through pictures, etc. You have to have you have to build and maintain a small, reliable, consistent volunteer force that you can turn to and say, hey, I need some help with this or that. And have a pipeline so that you're not constantly going back to the same people year in and year out, that you're kind of grooming them to take more initiative in the future years. And I think you need to be really focused on, what's the goal around fundraising. You're not the special events king or queen. You're not just there to put on all the events. You're there to fundraise. And so that takes time, focused time, where you're able to sit with families and alums and talk about the school, provide stories of excellence, and get them really excited about where the school is going. So start with the head, crystallize what your goals are, have a team of sport, whether they be colleagues or volunteers, and then really just focus on the fundraising and try and push the event components either off the table completely or limit them as much as you can.
This is such important information. I know it's a huge challenge that schools face, and it's something that really not many people enjoy diving into. And even when it comes to raising donations and getting support through your website, that's another thing that can be optimized as well. That I think a lot of schools don't put enough into that process on their website and making that a compelling message too. Just as a little side note, as a website person. But I appreciate your sharing all of the tips that you've shared to help schools kind of get into this really difficult and challenging topic of development. In our podcast, we also talk about mindfulness in addition to marketing and growing enrollment and growing support, and how mindfulness applies to people who do this work, right? As we've been saying, it's challenging, and trying to get all of the resources that you need is hard, and it can be overwhelming. So how do you see mindfulness applied to school fundraising and development efforts? How can that be used productively?
Yeah, I think we're energy people to begin with. I mean, and so taking a pause and reflection, I think, is important, especially as you think about the performance of the past year, the performance of your team, and where you'd like to go. I mean, living in schools is frenetic. It's only getting more frenetic. There's events, meetings, calls, emails. And as Aubrey mentioned earlier, the goals just, the goal line gets pushed further and further down the field. So I think, grounding in what's important, what's your why, what's the school's mission, why do you do this work is really important. I think it's understanding that you give your best effort every day, and that's enough. You can't burn the midnight oil all the time, or you will burn out. And so you need to find things that recharge your battery, replenish you. When I was leading teams, it was always great to have that retreat where the team could kind of go away, spend time with each other, get to know each other as people, and not just as colleagues. But Dave Michaelman is a former head and a consultant. He just actually sent a blog post about how he does meditation, every morning for 15 minutes. And Trevor from Truth Tree, has a process in the morning. For me, I find that time is walking my dog. And I just kind of, put in my music and take a walk around the block for a little bit. and that's very grounding. For others, it's walking in the woods or doing yoga or what have you. But I think as our worlds, our lives are so busy, I think finding a time to figure out what kind of fills you back up is really, really important. And now we can hang out with friends again, so that's important too.
Yes, thank goodness. Thank you for sharing that. That's really important because our development professionals, all our school leaders for sure, need to find that time to recenter themselves. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Now we're about to dive into the questions that we ask all our guests, our rapid fire questions. Are you ready to dive in, Chris?
Let's go.
Okay, I love your enthusiasm. All right. If you could put one book as mandatory reading in the high school curriculum, what would it be?
So I'm going to say How Soccer Explains the World. And you're going to go like, what? I'm a huge soccer fan. I love that soccer is growing in the United States. And I think this book is wonderful. And you learn a little world history along the way. So How Soccer Explains the World is a great one.
Very cool and fun. I'll have to look that up. Thanks. We'll put that on our Goodreads list. Chris, what's one app you could not live without?
TeamSnap. It is. It's an app that helps coordinate all my kids' practices and games. That helps me kind of stay on track generally with my day-to-day stuff. The TeamSnap.
I love that. That's a new app. We haven't heard that. And I know how active your children are after our mini conversation. So I'm sure you do need that. Okay. So what is one resource that you found helpful that you really go back to a lot?
So I've been following a couple of people, Austin Church being one, as a new solo entrepreneur, trying to figure out how to do this business thing. And I think there's a lot of tips and tricks about, writing and copy and engagement that have been really helpful. And also kind of how to position yourself and your company to find success. So I've already started to make some tweaks in some of the things that I've done, even though I'm 3 months in, and I anticipate, I'll continue to learn throughout this year.
Thank you so much. That's great. What is one great piece of advice that you can leave us with today, Chris?
So when I was earlier in my career, I had a boss that came to me one day and said, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be effective?" Frankly, I'm still battling that, but I think in schools, you need to think about what is the best thing for your team, especially as a leader. You're there with a servant leadership heart. And so looking at, what's going to be the most effective thing is the most important, and kind of winning points on being right, has to take a back seat. But and the more roles you have in schools, the more interesting you are. So I don't be afraid to say yes and jump in and try and do something new. I think it's energizing, it's refreshing. And it makes you more marketable down the road.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was a great piece of advice. Now,
if
people want to learn more about you and Lead Team Partners, where can they find you online?
So leadteampartners.com is the website. And then you'll see me a lot on LinkedIn. That's the one social that I use. So, and you can always send me an email at chris@leadteampartners.com.
Thank you, Chris. It's really been great to have you here. Thanks for sharing so much great information for our audience.
Inquiry Tracker is the all-in-one CRM solution used by over 250 schools. Easily manage all your inquiries, tours, and open houses. Key instant analytics help you manage and grow a robust pipeline. So end spreadsheets forever.
The smart online application system with powerful document upload is a game changer. No school is too small or too big, and their Fast Start program will get you up and running in no time.
Best of all, the system is designed by K through 12 education, marketing, and admissions professionals. Check out Inquiry Tracker at inquirytracker.net. That's inquiry with an E, tracker.net.
Thanks for joining us on the Mindful School Marketing Podcast.
We'd love it if you pop into iTunes and leave a review, 5-star preferred. Let us know how you like the show. It helps us improve what we're doing and helps others find us too.